stream segment of Mikasa Tsukasa. And of course, as always, I'm your humble host, Niko House. Now, by now, 100% of you have already heard about this vote for this quote-unquote anti-BDS bill. Yeah. It's been, people have been DMing me about it. People have been tweeting about it, tagging me and everything. And to be honest with you, if you've been a fan of this particular channel for the last 3 years, you know I love waiting that 24 hours to see how people overreact, get all emotional. They put their finger in the air. They pull out their phone on Twitter. They read a few tweets to figure out how they should feel about something. And then they start, this is how I feel about it. I've always felt this way about it. Of course I did all of my research. I went to Twitter. What else do I need to do? Like, if Twitter says I should be mad, and if Twitter says it's an anti-BDS bill, and if Twitter says that Tulsi and Ro and Ayana voted for an anti-BDS bill, then that's exactly what happened, right? Because pundits and commentators and Twitter influencers have never gotten anything wrong about Tulsi ever. Except for most of them have, honestly. The reactions are probably the funniest part of when you're talking about situations like this, because out of every 30 reactions, one of them has done their research, and you can tell by how you engage with them. And when I say do your research, I really mean like do your damn research. Let's just start off with, before we even dig into the resolution, let's talk about that fact. It's a resolution. Stop walking around on Twitter talking about Tulsi voted for an anti-BDS bill. She's pushing anti-BDS laws. No, she's not. An anti-BDS bill would be a bill that would outlaw BDS, and it would make it the law. Then it would, of course, have to get through the Senate and then, of course, be signed by the president. This, instead, is a resolution. It is merely a proclamation or a declaration. It does not have any binding elements whatsoever. And if you actually read the resolution instead of trying to use the word bill, which I know some people aren't purposely doing, but a lot of people are, they do say anti-BDS bill, and they're using that word so they can be inflammatory to make it seem like it was something that it was not. And I'm not even gonna get into whether or not I agree with the vote yet. I'm gonna save that for the end. But it's not a bill, it's a resolution. It doesn't hold any weight. It holds no water whatsoever. It's, to be completely honest with you, this entire thing isn't even really relevant. It's not going to change in one form or another the outcome of the Israel-Palestine conflict at all. That's the sad truth about resolutions, I think, that people don't really get, but it is what it is. So, let's actually talk about the resolution. I would have thought, that's what I said, I would have thought that, considering that over the last 3 or 4 years, Tulsi and Khanna have actually been two of the best in the House of Representatives on the issue of the Israel and Palestine conflict. So the moment that they actually vote for a resolution that was being perpetuated as exclusively anti-BDS, I would have thought that most people would have took a step back and say, hold up. Okay, there might be a little bit more to this than what I originally thought. And that's because there is. Now, while there are some elements of the resolution that say that the government will not vote or will not participate in BDS, which they shouldn't be, on the other side of that fence, there are other elements that exclusively protect the right of people who want to engage in BDS. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at it, because I really hope all the outraged people are here, because I love it. I ain't gonna lie, it's entertaining to watch people just I just knew that Tulsi and bro were gonna let me down. I just knew it. I hate them so much. Instead of just doing 2 clicks and looking up the resolution themselves, it would have probably been easier to do all that. So this is what the resolution actually says. I'm not gonna read all of it, but I'll read the important stuff. So here's the problematic things, a couple of the problematic things in the resolution, right? It says, whereas the democratic Jewish state of Israel is a key ally and strategic partner of the United States. That's true. Don't really like it, but it is what it is. It's a fact of life. We accepted it. So the next thing says, whereas it is a hallmark of American democracy for citizens to petition the United States government in favor or against U.S. foreign policy. Uh-oh. That doesn't sound like a resolution that was meant to infringe on the First Amendment to me. Okay. Whereas the United States Constitution, whereas the United States Constitution protects the rights of United States citizens to articulate political views, including with respect to the policies of the United States or foreign governments. Whereas American policy has long sought to bring peace to the Middle East and recognize that both the Israeli and Palestinian people should be able to live in safe and sovereign states free from fear and violence with mutual recognition. Oh, whoa, wait a minute. Hold up. But I thought this resolution was exclusively about silencing First Amendment constitutional rights and banning BDS. Because that's what all of the stuff says, all the article said, and that's what Twitter said. See, if you would have dug a little bit deeper, then you would have learned that this bill, or this resolution, I should say, was purposely convoluted, right? It was a resolution that asserted the right of Palestine to live as a sovereign state, which actually has not been done. In other words, there have been no resolutions or bills that have passed in the U.S. House of Representatives that recognizes Palestinian rights exclusively and their right to exist as a sovereign nation free from the terror of Israel. Most of the time, they're voting to bomb Palestine. So now, in front of them, in front of like people like Khanna and Tulsi, who have over the last 4 years have been good on Palestinian and the Israel-Palestine conflict in general. Now they have something in front of them that says, well, the government won't participate in BDS. So that's how it's going to come out, is an anti-BDS resolution. But it says, for the first time in our history, or at least for the first time since they've been in Congress, they actually have a resolution in front of them that asserts the right of Palestinian sovereignty. It's like, what do you do in that situation? Are you going to vote against the resolution that for the first time asserts the right of Palestinian sovereignty? For those of you who don't know what the definition of a sovereign nation is, a sovereign nation means no other nation reserves the right to just enter your borders, expand settlements, invade your country without facing some type of international repercussion. So, in other words, the United States is a sovereign nation. Venezuela is a sovereign nation. That's what that basically means. You get a seat at the table, and you are recognized as your own entity. That's what this resolution does for the first time. And so, of course, it's a little bit more complicated than what people probably would expect. Now, of course, on the surface, it's like, well, this is an anti-BDS bill because that's what the news said it is. But it's not the case. I'm not saying that it's pro-BDS. I'm saying that you should do your research. You can talk about the parts of it that you don't like. You can talk about the parts of it that you like. But to pretend like it's anti-BDS when it's not, it's not really, you're not arguing in good faith to pretend, because it means you just haven't done your research. Now, like I said, historically, at least in recent history, the last 3 to 4 years, Tulsi and Roe have been great on it. there have been a lot of people who have been tagging me saying Bernie wouldn't have voted for this. Yeah, wrong. That's wrong. Bernie's actually anti-BDS. Bernie is actually anti-BDS. I repeat, Bernie is actually anti-BDS. Where on the flip side, Tulsi actually said on TYT in her interview that she does support Americans' right to protest, that she does support their right to exercise their First Amendment rights, and support BDS. Whether or not she personally supports it is somewhat irrelevant, as long as she supports Americans' First Amendment rights to do so. But BDS calls for Israel to abide by international law. No, that's not what BDS is. It calls for Israel to abide by international law, and if they don't, they will go through boycotts. What is it? Boycotts, sanctions, and divestment. That's what it is. That's what BDS is. So they support. So Tulsi and Roe, both in the past and still in the present, do support people's First Amendment rights. That's why I was wondering if anybody would ever think of the bill that Elon's about to introduce. If you want to throw shade at either of them, Roe, Tulsi, or Pressley, throw shade after they vote for Elon's bill or against Elon's bill, which actually promotes Americans' First Amendment right to participate in things like BDS. If they vote against that, then we have a problem. But that's not what this particular bill does. So I want to go in a little bit deeper in the resolution, talk a little bit more about some of the bad things about it and some of the good things about it. So it says, whereas support for peace between the Israelis and Palestinians has long-standing bipartisan support in Congress. That part's not true. It sounds nice on paper, but it isn't true. But it's good to hear it being asserted on a piece of paper. Whereas the long-standing policy of the United States that a peaceful resolution to the Israel-Palestine conflict should come through direct negotiation between the government of Israel and Palestinian Authority, with the support of countries in the region and around the world. That's actually a good thing. That's a good thing. It asserts that we should only be supporting both parties, but we should not be dictating the outcome in any way, form, or fashion as a government. 100% true. It's once again, you can see why it will be a little bit more difficult to vote against this if you actually sat down and go through everything. Because guess what? If I'm Tulsi, God knows, if I'm Tulsi and everybody, if I know everybody has been looking for anything to attack me on, imagine voting against this, and then the narrative becomes what? Tulsi voted against recognizing Palestine as a sovereign nation. That's what would have happened. So it was almost like a lose-lose situation for her, because I'm sure she knew when she voted for this that people were going to gaslight. But at the end of the day, that's what would have happened. So you go on and it says, so this goes to the problematic stuff. This is the problematic part of the resolution. Whereas cooperation between Israel and the United States is of great importance, especially in the context of rising anti-Semitism, authoritarianism, and security problems in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. I don't believe that that's why we should be, like, Israel should take care of itself by not screwing over its people in Palestine. Like, that is not anti-Semitism. It is, we're tired of the Israeli government shitting on the rights of brown people and Muslims in the region. So that's one of the problematic parts of the bill. Whereas the global boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement targeting Israel is a campaign that does not favor a two-state solution and that seeks to exclude the state of Israel and the Israeli people from the economic, cultural, and academic life of the rest of the world. Whereas the global boycott, divestment and sanctions movement is one of several recent political movements that undermine the possibility for a negotiated solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict by demanding concessions of one party alone and encouraging Palestinians to reject negotiations in favor of international pressure. Actually, I don't know if the BDS movement says that specifically. I don't think it says to reject negotiations, but the BDS does demand concessions from one party because it's only one party committing atrocities like in the face of the entire world and pretending like they won't do anything about it. Like we have nothing to do about it. Now, here's where things get a little bit tricky. So, will Bernie, Tulsi, and Williamson visit Palestine? I imagine that Tulsi will visit Palestine. With the fact that the BDS movement should be, and absolutely 100% is, according to this resolution, protected under the First Amendment. Not to mention, you should be able to spend your money however the hell you want to. Me personally, I don't know if I'm actually for the BDS movement because, and I imagine that this is probably Tulsi's mindset too, because I'm really consistent in my ideology, especially when it comes to my politics. What do I mean by that? If you've listened to this network, myself, Fiorella, Pasta especially, there's one thing that we discuss, especially because we're always talking about foreign affairs and foreign policy more than about anybody else. And that is sanctions never harm the government. Bibi Netanyahu continues to win. His right-wing authoritarian staff, or his right-wing authoritarian administration, continue to win. So if we quote-unquote sanction people, the same results will happen in Israel as it does in Iran or Venezuela when the government sanctions those people. The people are the ones who are openly hurt. Not everybody in Israel, most people in Israel don't really agree with Bibi, to be completely honest with you. But the people should not be necessarily punished or harmed because, like, economically or otherwise, because of the actions of their government. They should be. There are activists and leaders in the community that stand up. Hold on, let me read some of these super chats. Hey, it's Ali. Ireland has done pro BDS stuff like stop buying Israeli product. But basically, I'm of the mindset, like I have always been, that sanctions ultimately hurt people. And not even if, it's already happened. The more successful a sanctions movement against the private industry, the civilian industry of Israel, because the BDS is not exclusive to the government. Even if it was, it still only hurts people because we've seen this historically. But now we're talking about sanctioning the private industry for people that have nothing to do with the government. And ultimately, there will be retaliation to the people that we're trying to help, which are the Palestinians. And we've already seen it. The more that people sanction the government, the private industry specifically, the more the Palestinians suffer. Because if they are losing money, it's already bad enough that the Palestinians get breadcrumbs from the Israeli government. But if we continue to remove money and disrupt the cash flow of the private sector, of course that would disrupt, because they take like 40% of taxes in Israel. So if that's going to disrupt the cash flow, obviously, of the government, and then that in turn will lead to retaliation against the Palestinian people. So in other words, sanctions always hurt people. It rarely, Bibi gonna be all right. So that's also something that people should probably be considering. I am all for the right of people, because you should be able to spend your money however you want to. That's why I said I support Ilhan Omar's upcoming resolution that asserts the First Amendment right to protest in such a way. 100%. I personally would not be, I don't like sanctioning, period. Sanctioning is an act of war. Sanctioning always hurts people, not politicians. It's 100% true. We've seen it over and over again. If we want to achieve the desired result, there should be a negotiation. There's already been one. In 92, 93, we almost actually did it. But then the leader got assassinated, and that's a whole different discussion. Hey, it's Ali. Thanks for the super chat. BDS is not about sanctions. It's about recognizing Israel as an apartheid state. But we do recognize it as an apartheid state. Khanna does. Tulsi Gabbard does. BDS is literally boycott, divestment, and sanctions. It is actually about sanctions. And there is some truth that it will fan flames. Once again, I'm not anti-BDS, but what I am saying is there is a fact that we cannot ignore, that it may fan flames. It will absolutely not help the Palestinian people. Because for those of you who don't know, there are a lot of really wealthy countries that have already been sanctioning the Middle East to such a degree that people from that country, or excuse me, not the Middle East, they have already been sanctioning Israel to such a degree that people from Israel, if you have an Israeli passport or if you're an Israeli citizen, you can't even travel to some countries in the Middle East, like Dubai, places like Bahrain, places like Kuwait. You aren't allowed to travel there to work or anything. So this has already been happening, and all we've seen since then is the Israeli government ramping up on the violations, the human rights violations of the Palestinian people. So it is about sanctions. It's called the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Like, that's what it's called. They named it that. So while I agree that we must protect people's First Amendment right to participate in this movement, we must protect the right for you to spend your money how you choose to, how you want to. But I once again agree that it's not, you can't just, the resolution, like I said, you can't pretend like it's just an anti-BDS resolution, because I just read the words directly from the resolution, and that's not what it says. That's not what it says. This isn't conjecture. I read to you verbatim the words from the resolution. What did that say? Whereas a hallmark of democracy for American citizens to petition the United States government in favor or against U.S. foreign policy. Whereas the United States Constitution protects the rights of citizens of the United States to articulate political views, including with respect to the policies of the United States foreign governments. Whereas American foreign policy has long sought to bring peace to the Middle East and recognize that both Israel and Palestinian people should be able to live in safe and sovereign, key word there, states free from fear and violence with mutual recognition. Those are not anti-BDS words. In fact, once again, those are words that have never been voted on in the United States government. Like I've said, when we bring up Palestine, it's usually to bomb them. That's what we usually talk about in the House and the Senate when we're talking about Palestinian rights. Whereas, so we're going to go ahead and go back into some of the problematic things about this resolution. So it says, whereas the global BDS movement promotes principles of collective guilt, mass punishment, and group isolation, which are destructive prospects for progress towards peace and a two-state solution. Yeah, actually, it kind of does. Whereas boycotts and similar tools aimed at promoting racial justice and social change have been used effectively in the United States, South Africa, and other parts of the world. Whereas, in contrast to protest movements that have sought racial justice and social change, the global boycott and divestment movement and sanctions targeting Israel is not about promoting coexistence, civil rights, and political reconciliation, but about questioning and undermining the very legitimacy of the country and its own people. See, I don't know if I believe that, because different people have different reasons for participating in the movement. So that part of the resolution is problematic, because it is a self-defeating, like, you just made the argument that you shouldn't assume You shouldn't collectively assume or base on the collectivity of a group, or base your opinion about the collectivity of a group on one interpretation of their opinion. You shouldn't do that, because that's not why everybody does it. A lot of people believe in a two-state solution. A lot of people believe in the negotiations between the two. If you understand anything about foreign policy, eventually you're going to have both of them sit down, and both of them are going to have to concede. Because at the end of the day, it's about, okay, I'm tired of seeing people die on both sides. Let's get this taken care of and let's move on in peace. But that part of the resolution it's wrong. So, in the resolve part, it says the House of Representatives opposes the global boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement targeting Israel, including efforts to target the United States companies that are engaged in commercial activities that are legal under the United States law, and all efforts to delegitimize the state of Israel. It urges Israelis and Palestinians to return to direct negotiations as the only way to achieve the end of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, affirms the constitutional right of the United States citizens to free speech, including the right to protest or criticize the policies of the United States or foreign government, supports the full implementation of the United States Strategic Partnership of 2014, and then it reaffirms strong support for for a negotiated solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict, resulting in two states, a democratic Jewish state of Israel and a viable democratic Palestinian state, living side by side with peace and mutual recognition and security. So, like I said, let me get some of these super chats. People want to cancel Tulsi and go to Bernie over this, forgetting that Bernie voted multiple times in the 2000s to give Israel military aid, supported their invasion of Gaza in 2014. This is so nuanced. Yeah, it is very nuanced. And plus, Bernie is very, when defending himself yesterday, said, well, this is Bernie's stance. So, people really forget that, like, there is more. This is a very nuanced discussion to be had, because, so if I'm Tulsi, like I said, if she voted against this legislation, this is the first legislation that she would have voted on that asserted that Palestine deserves the right to live as a sovereign state. You understand that? It would have absolutely been used against her if she would have. I would have not voted for this, because I would have. If I don't like half of the language of the legislation, I'm not like Bernie, that's going to vote for Violence Against Women Act, because it's one line in a whole bill that is going to condemn an entire people, right? Like the 94 crime bill. I couldn't do that in good conscience. But what Bernie said is true about that bill, the 94 crime bill. If Bernie would have voted against the 94 crime bill, that is not what the discussion would have been. It would have been that Bernie voted against the Violence Against Women's Act, and no matter what he said to defend himself, no matter how much he condemned the crime bill, he would have been attacked for voting against, quote unquote, the Violence Against Women Act. So I wouldn't have voted for this personally, but in Tulsa, I understand it. In Roe's position, I understand it as well, only because Roe and Tulsi have both been good on the Israel-Palestine issue over the last 4 years, but both also, and as much as I attack Roe as being a careerist, Roe has been pretty just change her message for a resolution because people are going to cover it the wrong way. Sanctions do hurt people. They don't hurt governments. They hurt people. And these are the facts. So it's consistent with her message. And also, like I said, for the 150th time, this is the first resolution, the first legislation, period, that has asserted that Palestine does deserve the right, which, to be honest with you, they did that on purpose, in my opinion, to bait people into voting for it, because it puts you in a corner if you want to recognize Israel or Palestine as a state, as a sovereign state. So it puts you in a corner. So are you really going to vote against this? So yes, it does assert that the government is anti-BDS. It will not participate in the BDS movement. However, because other governments have participated in the BDS movements, like Hayat Ali just pointed out. However, with that being said, it literally says, but the people have the right to participate in the BDS movement. Not only when it comes to, or just not only protest movements when it comes to the American government, but the foreign government as well. We just don't think this is the best way to go about it. This isn't like the bill in the Senate, which was a literal bill that would have been signed into law that asserts the federal government's right to punish people for participating in the BDS movement. That one failed, which is actually kind of surprising to me considering how many Republicans are in the Senate. But you have to have a nuanced discussion about these things. And the Israel-Palestine conflict is always a nuanced discussion. Bibi Netanyahu is wrong. Bibi Netanyahu is a fucking madman. He is insane. A lot of the right-wing authoritarians in his administration are insane. But it would be insane also and hypocritical, especially as a United States citizen, to equate Bibi Netanyahu's personal actions with the collective guilt or lack thereof of the entire nation or the peoples of Israel. Just like Trump's ridiculous, nonsensical actions and Twitter dribble are not emblematic of every single person in the United States. Nor do we want to be punished like it is. Although at this point I would kind of understand it, but that's neither here nor there. There should absolutely be a nuanced discussion, but the whole, oh my God, she voted against BDS, that is a literal lie. She didn't vote against BDS. In fact, in this resolution, it very specifically says we recognize and protect the right for people to protest this government or foreign ones. So, Mr. Mythosule, you can go ahead and unsubscribe, bro. That's fine. If you don't like the facts, it's not my job to make you like the facts. But this is politics. This is how life is. It isn't black and white. Most resolutions, most bills are not black and white. Like I said, I wouldn't have voted for it. But I understand how you could feel like you were kind of cornered into voting for it. Now, when Elon does introduce her resolution to protect free speech, then at that point, if they vote against that, if Ro, Ayanna, and Tulsi vote against that bill, because that's supposed to be a bill to assert the right to protect amendments, people's First Amendment right to participate in such a protest. If they vote against that, then we have a problem. Shauna Burley, thanks for the super chat. The goal of BDS movement is to pressure the government to enforce the boycott of Israel. This is the very definition of suppression of free speech. Huh? I'm confused. And that. Mike Williams, who are the leaders of the Palestinian government? Israel is the oppressive government in this case because they have all the power. Yeah, 100%. They do. If there isn't a two-state solution, and Palestine will lose because the United States is literally giving Israel unlimited amounts of money. So we can't, that's ludicrous. And I doubt that the people of Palestine are completely, the people I know from Palestine that are actually either from Jordan or Palestine, they have family there, they would rather have a two-state solution where the two sovereign states are recognized than have a bloodbath over whether or not it should be a one-state solution. I get it. The sins of our fathers make our lives 10 times harder. Got it. We have to talk about solutions now. And I'm tired of seeing people die on both sides. I'm tired of seeing American soldiers die. I know they come from an oppressive U.S. I'm tired of seeing veterans die. We've worked as a veteran. I have worked for an oppressive United States regime. Even though I opted out of deploying, I was still a paralegal for it. So technically, I've worked for an oppressive regime. Do you think that because the regime is oppressive that I'm still not sick of seeing veterans commit suicide and soldiers dying for no reason? No, but I'm also tired of seeing people in the Middle East die for no reason. So what do you think I'm gonna do? Just complain and bitch about the United States being an oppressive government, or I'm gonna look for solutions? Solutions, because I don't want anybody dying, especially for some rich white man's money. It is what it is. So, does anybody have any super chat? Wheat Wallet. Hold up, I haven't even seen half of y'all. Wheat Wallace, getting ratioed. I don't think you can get ratioed on live chat, but it sounded good. Stop pretending, please. Stop pretending. This isn't Niko. This is an anti-BDS resolution. No, I literally just read the words. So, yeah. If you want to ignore facts, like I said, bro, that's all on you. Some of y'all are absolutely just hard pressed on finding reasons to hate Tulsi, and those are pretty easily weeded out. Some people, like I do, and they don't understand the history of legislation dedicated to this. There are a lot of people who didn't know, for example, that Bernie and Tulsi both voted in they voted in 2014 to bomb Gaza. Like, so when I say that there's never been legislation to, at least within recent history, to actually recognize Palestine as a sovereign state, I mean that shit. It was literally the total opposite before this. So just because you don't like the facts, because it actually takes some type of logical processing and nuance to discuss it, that's not my problem. It's yours. I'm just here to deliver the facts for people who actually want to listen to them. American citizens, unfortunately, support Trump. And I don't believe that every American citizen should be, because you have to think about it like this. Why do most American citizens support Trump? Because propaganda runs rampant in the United States. So if propaganda runs rampant in the United States, by the way, Slavic American, you do some great work on your channel for, covering the Democratic primary, by the way. So good stuff. Go check his channel out. But propaganda runs rampant in Israel, just like it does here in the States. So yeah, maybe a little bit over half, most times, but I don't even think that's the case. The more that Israel has had to like branch out, and people have had to leave Israel to get an education, to move, to thrive, because it's way too expensive to live there. Here, just like what my job is to do every day on the channel. We come here, we educate people, we have a solid conversation, and some people are broken out of the chains of propaganda. So to pretend like everybody in Israel who, even if 50% of the population does agree with Bibi, which actually I don't believe that's the case, just from my experiences with a lot of Israeli people, they don't like Bibi. Most of them don't like, even if they agree with him, like even if they didn't like Palestinians, they don't like Bibi. So like that's a problem. A lot of them, you have to understand, economics will make, it's because likely there are probably about 20-25% of them got hate in their heart. But a lot of that hate in their heart comes from propaganda, just like in the United States. And so just like in the United States, I don't believe every dumbass Trump supporter should be culpable for their dumbassity when we live in a state, our country, that pushes propaganda down their throat. It is our job as people. The new kids don't understand politics. Ain't that the truth? Woo! Susan Wiseman, nope, there's an anti-Netanyahu movement in Tel Aviv. Yes, there is an anti-Netanyahu movement in Tel Aviv, and it's been around for quite some time. In the biggest cities in Israel, coincidentally enough, just like in the biggest cities in the United States, in the cities of affluence, in the cities where there are a lot of educated people. Wooly, clearly you didn't actually listen to the video, because I literally read the facts verbatim, bro. So don't know what to tell you. You should bring Tulsi on and ask her to discuss the nuances. I trust both of you, but both need more info and perspective. Oh, but I need more info and perspective. Nothing about the. It doesn't matter. Even if it was an anti-BDS resolution, even if it was that, like, all it did was condemn the Palestinians, prop up Israel, and say we want to punish people to do that who do this. Even if it was it's a resolution, so it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't do anything. BDS is legitimate and free speech. Yeah, BDS is legitimate. That's actually what the, that's what the resolution says. BDS is free speech in this resolution. Mr. Right, Jews own our government. Hey man, none of that stuff up in here, bro. We don't play that game. We don't like to generalize like that. Oh, right. So I think that I'm about to get up out of here. Thank you all so much for sticking around for this live stream segment of Mi Casa Su Casa. And like I said, man, don't just engage in mob mentality. You gotta learn how to take a step back at times and be like, look, man, can't just point my finger into the Twitter wind and be like, okay, this is how I'm gonna feel about this issue. Gotta take a step back and actually think before you just react to things. Issues have nuance. Like I said, would I have voted for or against it? Actually, I might have ended up abstaining from this particular legislation because it was so convoluted that, to me personally, it looked like it was purposely convoluted legislation so that people would not know which way they should vote on it, so they would feel pressure to vote for it because of the uniqueness of this legislation. Like I said, in recognizing Palestine as a sovereign state, in recognizing Americans' rights to protest, but then simultaneously propping up Israel, and then simultaneously saying that the BDS movement is bad. Like, it's clearly they played that game on purpose, and so I probably would have personally abstained from it. Tulsi Rowe and Ayana voted for it, but my judgment will come whenever they engage and vote on Ilhan's bill, which protects the right of citizens to participate in the BDS movement, and that's exclusively what the bill is supposed to be about, which is reflective of a few of the lines of this particular resolution. So that's when my judgment will be made. Until then, always remember, people, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.